Morning. All right, continue. I think we're going to have a few folks join. For those of you not familiar with the TIO, we sometimes have some back-to-back programming, and so we had a member meeting this morning where a product officer was speaking about your product roadmap given COVID. So good morning to everyone that is joining us, and particularly to our two Meet Our members, Morgan Armstrong and Jonathan Johnson. Morgan looks a little different than Wendy Morgan, if that's who you were expecting. We kept the Morgan, but we had to do a quick switch out. So welcome to our Meet the Members. Here we are on Tuesday, May 19th, and I'm going to have Justin go to my next slide. So we generally keep everybody muted. We have a small group, so if you want to ask questions during this, please feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you. We love our nonverbal participation codes, but we also have some pre-submitted questions, so we've got those as well. And then on our next slide, we have our Mobilize platform, I'm fairly certain. No, social media. So feel free, Jonathan and Morgan, if you want to put your social media handles or your company's social media handles in the chat. A lot of times folks that participate with these will do a tweet about things that they learn or things that they hear. So if you want to share that, that would be awesome. And then there's ours, and then we post these videos after the fact in our YouTube channel and share it in case you missed it in Mobilize. Mobilize is our members only platform that Justin is the primary point of contact on. So if you're our member and you're not in there, there's actually great stuff that you're not seeing on our website or in our socials. So give Justin a shout or a note. And then I've said his name about 5 times, but Justin and I are technically your hosts for today. We keep it our gender neutral selves. I'm going to be honest, I don't think either one of us is looking quite as fabulous these days because we both need haircuts, so just pretend that's what we look like in reality. And then next week, we will have Kate Winkler and Javier Ruiz, CEOs from Ruby Receptionist and Principal CEO of Ruiz Partners, respectively. So join us for that after a little Memorial Day break. And then I would like to introduce briefly, because I'm going to let them introduce themselves more thoroughly, Morgan Armstrong, Principal HR Business Partner at Puppet, and also my dear friend. So glad that she's here this morning responding to a frantic text message. And then Jonathan Johnson, founder and CEO of the Rooted School, who's actually a new member. So my question for both of you, since I've shared your titles and we see your lovely faces on screen, where are you each joining us from today? And I'm going to start with Morgan. See, these are the easy warm-up questions. Morgan, where are you joining us from today?
I love it. I'm very familiar with where I am today.
Good.
I've gotten to know this space really well. So I am calling you from the home office, my home office in North Portland. So my husband and I and our 3-year-old son live in University Park in North Portland. So calling you from the shared office space that my husband, who is a middle school science teacher, and I have been swapping back and forth. We've got a system dialed in. I've got the dongles I need for my computer. He's got the dongles he needs. We keep our notebooks and his respective textbooks on the guest bed, which is also in this room. And we've gotten very good at doing the swapping in and out.
And right before everyone joined us, your 3-year-old son, did he say goodbye, mommy? That was really cute.
He did. So they were on a bike ride, and I'm really hoping that this was not pilfered from somebody's yard and maybe it had fallen, but he handed me this and said, I'm going to go watch a show, to which I said, great, because that means you're going to be quiet.
That is amazing. Jonathan, nice tie-in with Morgan's partner being a middle school teacher. Why don't you tell us where you're joining us from today and let everyone be really impressed with the books behind you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Jonathan. I'm not this scholarly, I promise. I wish I could claim it. I'm the library of a synagogue that our flagship school in New Orleans is based. So I'm defying shelter at home to hang out here and be with you, and also for families who need things like hotspots and other things to weather out the distance learning that we're doing now.
Very cool. So Jonathan, you're in New Orleans and Morgan is in North Portland. I'm in Northeast Portland in our office. That's not actually my house, but it would be awesome if I were that committed. Jonathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Rooted School is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rooted School is a nonprofit that I started about 6 years ago that's based in New Orleans and partners now with communities across the U.S. to open charter high schools that address local talent gaps, starting with the tech sector. I would say, simply put, Rooted Schools thrive in communities that are growing family-sustaining jobs that are at a faster rate than their ability to attract or train local talent. And so I chose to be a part of this community because we received an invitation about a year ago and some early funding from Washington State Charter School Association to explore the possibility of opening Rooted in partnership with a community in Washington. And of everywhere that I've explored the past year, Vancouver has emerged as the most promising community partner to date. And this is what has brought me to Cara and TAO, and I'm really excited about the potential of engaging with y'all.
So technically you're a Southwest Washington representative member today. I love it. Morgan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Puppet does, and then I'll get back to both of y'all's interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely. So Puppet is an IT automation software company for enterprise organizations. So if you find yourself needing to automate some of your enterprise IT needs these days, you might be. Puppet is a great product for that. It's been in the Portland is the home of Puppet. We have offices now across the globe, but Portland has been Puppet's home for about the last 15 years.
Awesome. So Morgan, I'm going to start with you because you've been a TAO member at a few different organizations. So why be a TAO member and be an active one at that, particularly as you've transitioned both up in your career and through a few different companies?
Absolutely. So I think that one of the things that I find unique to the culture of Portland, and I've actually experienced this in a couple other industries as well, but I think that Portland Tech in particular has there's more of a community focused energy in Portland, where yes, we are competing for some of the same talent. It's a growing city, but it's still a relatively small city. But I've never had a no. I've never received a no when I've reached out to colleagues at other organizations that are either in similar roles or different roles. And the degree of information sharing, the degree of best practices, the degree of like, hey, I'm just curious about what you do and I'd like to get to know you and your organization. Portland Tech, in my experience, has just been really open to that. And so organizations like TAO help contribute to that degree of information sharing and sort of the concept that high tides rise all ships, and that, yes, we want our companies to do well. We want the work that we're doing to be great, but we recognize that we're going to do that all together.
Yeah, it's a theme that comes up constantly. It's like community, community, community. So Jonathan, I'm going to ask you the same question. You replied back to our prep email this morning, and you said, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be together while apart. So I know you sort of joined and then unique circumstances happened, but this is an opportunity for you to talk about why you joined TAO and what you are looking for from this very open community that Morgan just described.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Cara. So I joined TAO because I believe that one of the biggest bets we can make on the future is that on talent. And unfortunately, in communities across the U.S., and I imagine this rings somewhat true in sort of Clark County and in sort of the TAO community, is that there exists a contingent of high potential, yet underrepresented and often overlooked talent that, if we're going to mobilize local economies, needs to be tapped. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to build community with that in mind. And as I shared with Cara, specifically over the next 3 months, we're in the process of looking for companies for whom our narrative resonates with, to come on as early non-binding partners, to share letters of support for a school like us coming to fruition within the region and community at large.
And so that kind of leads me to my next question, and I'm going to stick with Jonathan, but Morgan, I'll ask you the same ones. So what kind of is that diversity, inclusion, equity strategy that you're exploring as you bring the Rooted School potentially to the Portland metro area?
Yeah, so I think there's basically two approaches that we think of. And I think that they both are, they present a challenge, but I think they also present a call to action and an opportunity for us. So I'm less grounded in a lot of the data within sort of the Portland and Oregon area, so forgive me that I'm relying on New Orleans. But New Orleans is very much a tale of two cities. For the median Black household in the city, they're bringing in about $26,000 a year compared to a white household's $68,000 a year. As you might imagine, that leads to radically different life prospects for the young people that I oftentimes work with and see in our schools, and certainly how you navigate the vicissitudes of life, and obviously COVID being a really prominent example that we're all navigating as I speak. On top of this, we have a community of companies pre-COVID who were opening family-sustaining jobs, living wage jobs at a rate where they were not able to tap or train local talent to fill. And so we see an opportunity from a DEI lens through bridging that divide that currently exists, and say, well, instead of outsourcing the job, or instead of sort of ignoring the opportunity to innovate, why not be open-minded about where we source talent and how we train them, and create public and private partnerships that we may not have ever thought possible before, had we not thought about what the future economy may need of us.
I think that's really well said, and I don't know the median household income in the Portland metro area, but I would assume that you see similar disparities. So I'm going to ask Morgan. So she's in an interesting role. She works for a company that's super supportive of DEI initiatives in the city, that's done a lot for allyship training, and has a passion for this work. So Morgan, I'm interested, like, at both the puppet level, some of the strategies that you're employing or were employing prior to this, and sort of what you're seeing in the ecosystem from a DEI standpoint.
Great question. So I've been a puppet for just over a year, and one of the things that actually attracted me to the organization is that Puppet has been a leading edge organization in terms of programming related to increasing equity, increasing access, increasing inclusion within its organization. Is it perfect? No, far from. But it has been, in the Portland market, an organization that has been cutting edge, that's been on the forefront of a lot of these programs. A lot of that is thanks to leadership that recognizes the value of it, but also people on the ground. Primarily, some of you on the call may know Tanya Webb. She left Puppet about 4 months ago. She had an incredible legacy of establishing the programs within Puppet. So we have interview training, we've got internal unconscious, we have a series of 3 sessions really, unconscious bias, we've got privilege, and then we've got an ally skills workshop that we do internally as part actually in partnership with TechTown PDX as well. We also have manager training specifically geared toward building an inclusive workforce. We have internal and external opportunities for people to learn. One of the things that I'm very excited that Puppet has recently launched is a council of employees. So we're calling it our IDEA Council, IDEA for inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. And we have employees within each of those 4 pillars that are both partnering with HR on existing programs and structure, but also bringing their own voices and their own perspectives to the table to help create new programming. It's unlike former program creation where it sits very firmly within the function of human resources, which can at times be somewhat siloed. It's a spin on that perspective, and it's really saying out to the organization, yes, there's still a huge body of work that's managed and maintained by human resources, but this is something that we have passion for within a lot of employees within our organization. So let's actually cast this net very wide and bring as many voices to the table as we can, because I'm a white cis lady in her mid-30s that grew up in a very white rural community. And so while I have my own interests, I work for an organization that sees the value in equity, I only can see the world through the lens that I can see the world. And somebody who grew up from a different perspective just has a different perspective. So we're wanting really to bring as many of those voices to the table as possible. So our IDEA Council is only a few months old, but I'm incredibly excited. I sit in an advisory role to that group. And it's representative of all of the regions of our organization, as well as many different departments. It was really important for us not only to have representation from a gender perspective, from a race perspective, also from departments and regions around the world. So that's something that I'm super excited about, and hopefully there's definitely going to be bumps in the road, but hopefully it'll be something that we can bring to the Portland community and say, this is a case study of, this is a thing that we did. Here's the pros and cons. Here's the infrastructure. Now go do it, you too, because it's going to, again, make the community better overall.
Jonathan, I think I found a great person for you to talk to after the fact.
Thanks, Cara.
Puppet's one of those companies that you definitely need to be talking to. So, okay, let's talk like in specific COVID world. So there's been a lot of conversation around equity and inequities being exacerbated, particularly when you talk about the digital divide. You're seeing a lot of systemic racial bias in healthcare and what communities are being disproportionately affected by the virus, which has a lot to do with the past and as well some to do with the present, and to Jonathan's point, some of those family living wages. In your work today, how are you seeing that equity narrative challenged or changing? And Jonathan, I'll start with you because we're putting this like now new spin on it with a global pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, one thought that immediately comes to mind, Cara, is how it's began to accelerate the need for more post-secondary options for young people. I think leading up to this crisis, you had a lot of young people in college, and then also college who were graduating and going into the workforce, and then young people in high school who were going to college, who were looking at like one of the most robust economies that we've seen in a very long time. They were seeing job growth that was very robust, almost come to a screech halt, and now are beginning to question the value of college, the value of that investment versus other options like gap years and things of that sort that provide maybe some other sorts of value that we were previously overlooking. And so I think that is something that we'll be paying attention to a lot of us, of what are the myriad, like what are the other experiences that not only create like well-rounded life experiences for young people, but for young people on the lower end of the economic ladder, accelerate them or put them on a path toward financial freedom faster. Given that this is likely to linger, or in the future we may deal with this even more, and unfortunately, a lot of families who've been held back for many years and decades are getting the short end of that stick.
I like the positive spin you put on that. Like, there is an opportunity here to potentially get folks into living wage roles that may not have been accessible. And I have done some work in rural Oregon this year, and what's interesting is that intersection between manufacturing and tech and ag and tech. And you know, one thing that I think about a lot is how are you having high school students learn just general tech skills that they could apply to any industry? Because what we hear a lot from our ag partners in rural Oregon is like, I could pay somebody $65,000 a year out of school if they have some kind of tech skill, because I don't have anybody that can run that, but like I can't recruit people to live in this part of the country or in a more rural area where it's super affordable to live with that salary, but it just may look different. And so I like the idea of kind of challenging that narrative of what that would look like. And we may see folks going more into rural areas because it may seem safer. Gosh, I wish we were having this conversation as like a DEI conversation and not just a Meet the Member, because I think we could get really deep into it. So Morgan, I'm going to transition over to you, and I want your opinion, because you work for a larger organization. Like, there are revenue numbers that have to be hit. How is your equity strategy looking today?
There are revenue numbers that have to be hit, for sure. So because Puppet has been at this work for a while, and I say at this work because it's not something that, it's sort of like diets don't work. You don't pick up the baton of diversity and then one day set it down. It's a sea change. It's a lifestyle change. So Puppet committed to a lifestyle change a while ago. So a lot of the and again, far from perfect, but a lot of the things that we have done, we're able to continue doing because it wasn't something that we had just recently sold as a benefit to our organization. It was already something that was part of the infrastructure of how we look at what we're offering our employees. So for example, I was on a call just this morning that was talking about training and what type of leadership training, what type of career advancement training do we want to provide for employees. A lot of that was sort of put on pause as we transitioned to a 100% distributed organization. But now we're looking back at it and saying, what do we want to add back to that reoccurring schedule? And the DE&I related content was hand in hand with the manager training, hand in hand with the interview skills, hand in hand with the how do you go about crafting your career roadmap at Puppet conversations. Which is great to see. So I think though, similar to what Jonathan was saying, is that this pandemic has really exposed what's already there, or has accelerated change, I think, that was already going to happen. So I think if you look at secondary education was already changing or needed to change, or people were already questioning the value of, is it an education, or am I getting certified and getting a piece of paper from this institution that now goes out into society and means something because I paid a lot of money for this piece of paper that I have. Yes, I think you do gain knowledge, but a lot of it also is that piece of paper. So I think similar to that sea change is also the change or the acceleration of recognizing inequity in the workplace. Absolutely anybody that has kids, whether they're 2 months old or 20 years old, that has kids now with them 24/7 while trying to work, the inequities there have been blasted open. So organizations that are able to provide that flexibility, I think are going to have a more engaged workforce, versus organizations that are less flexible, that are more structured and rigid around what they're still requiring for their employees under this situation. So to get back to your question, there hasn't been a huge deviation because it's part of the work that Puppet sees as important.
I love that answer, and you are so thoughtful and kind in the community, and you gave us a really nice compliment a couple weeks ago about pushing relevant content out into market. And one thing that we did that we had not done in the past is we had a survey and said, what works best for people during the day for us to present this? And we were surprised by the answer, but because we listened, the answer was like, I have kids, or, I need to walk my dog during lunch, and lunchtime programming when I'm not in the office isn't working for me. And evening programming at 4 o'clock when my kids are having their meltdown is not working for me. And so it's interesting that you say that, because I think that we often, to your point, think that we need to be doing something that's like exceptional, but if the equity lens is always sort of in the back of your head, then you just kind of continue deploying that in this brave new world. So
like you said, it's a pivot. It's a pivot. Yeah. Just like I would have previously loved to attend a happy hour timed event, whereas these days by 5 o'clock, I would like not to be staring into a camera anymore.
Preach. And Jonathan, you were already challenging the pivot of school, and now you're doing that in a world that may actually listen more to that being a viable path for a young person. So I think that's super cool. All right. So I'm going to say, if anybody on our audience has any questions, throw them in the chat and someone will follow up with you. But now it's the part of our call that's like my favorite part. And so I'll go first, and then I'll let Jonathan go, and then I'll let Morgan go, because I had to prep her for this via text because she's amazing. So we started this thing, and it was kind of kitschy, and it was like, okay, let's have everybody put on a funny hat. But what rapidly became apparent is these hats are really symbolic, because we all wear so many during the day, and people have had an opportunity to share some things that are maybe impactful to them at that moment. And so I had one hat picked out, if you looked at my LinkedIn post, but I totally went with the other one. So I'm putting on my Braves hat today, and it has very little to do with baseball, but more to do with the fact that Morgan was the pinch hitter today, and I love the ability of someone to be called up instantly from the minor leagues or the bench and say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to hit a home run. So Jonathan, what's your hat that you're wearing these days?
I'm not sure I can beat that, but and it's probably not what you'd expect with the books behind me, but just give me a second real quickly.
Oh wow, this is getting serious.
Oh
yeah, this is the hat.
I like that.
Now so I like wearing this these days because it's just a reminder to sort of keep the good vibes going, and to keep fun alive. So I do wear this, Morgan, building off your happy hour comment at happy hour, at least once a week, just to keep the juices flowing.
That's amazing, Jonathan. Thank you for doing that. All right, Morgan, what do you got? We literally threw this at you. We threw you a curveball. So I'm really curious what you've got next to you.
I was just really happy, honestly, when you first said it, that I was thinking I was going to have to wear the hat the whole time. And so that almost was the like, actually I have some meetings that I can't move around. But so yes. So the hat that I have is one that I wear. I love actually to garden. And so it's one that I wear in the yard, and when I'm getting the work done. I mentioned that I grew up in a rural community. So this is hat wear that often is seen. I think my dad actually has one that's very, very similar. But I've been doing a lot of getting back to basics these days. So we've always had a garden. This year it's huge, just because there's all that free time. So this is my gardening hat. I don't,
love it.
there's not a tremendous amount of metaphor. I guess I like to grow things.
No, I'm going to metaphor it before I
Okay.
say goodbye to y'all, and thank you again. What's interesting about our hats is I think they're all a nod to sort of the place in the world that we're from, because Jonathan, I think of New Orleans as a place of good times, and you got the good time hat going, and Morgan, you're giving a nod to your rural roots, and I'm giving a nod to the A. So with that, I will nod to all of you and say thank you so much for doing this. It was so great to get to know you. Anybody out there that wants to connect with Jonathan and see how they can support this school, let me know. Anyone that wants to connect with Morgan, if you need her expertise, she's pretty incredible. And thank you both for being TAO members, and we look forward to seeing you in some capacity between flexible work hours and or in person in the near future. So stay safe, healthy, sane, or a combination of the three at any given moment in the day. You are appreciated.
Thank you, Cara. You are too.
Everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.